The Wilsons had always been the kind of family people in town looked up to. Tom and Diane fell in love back when they were just 16, sitting next to each other in math class. They got married right after college and built a beautiful life, together in the peaceful town of Pine Valley. Everyone knew them. Tom with his friendly wave and Diane with her warm smile that made you feel instantly at home. Their son, Alex, was their pride and joy. At 17, he had grown into a tall, kind-hearted boy with dark, curly hair that never seemed to stay in place no matter how much he tried to tame it. He had his dad's deep laugh and his mom's gentle eyes. Alex played baseball for the high school team, worked weekends at the local bookstore, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian someday. His room was filled with trophies, dog-eared books about animals, and photos of camping trips with his parents. Life in Pine Valley moved at its own peaceful pace. Tom worked as an electrician, often helping neighbors for free when they needed. Diane taught 4th grade at the elementary school, where parents requested her class for their children year after year. The three of them lived in a 2-story blue house with white shutters and a big oak tree in the front yard, where Alex had built a tree house when he was 9. That Wednesday in April started like any other day. The morning was bright, but clouds rolled in by afternoon, bringing steady rain that drummed against the classroom windows while Diane taught. Tom called from a job site to say he'd be home late. Alex texted his mom after school. "Going to baseball practice, coach says we need to run drills even with the rain. Home by 6. 6 o'clock came and went. Diane made spaghetti, Alex's favorite, and set the table for 3. By 7, she called Tom, trying to keep the worry from her voice. "He's probably just waiting out the rain," Tom reassured her. But he packed up his tools and headed home early anyway. By 8, they started calling Alex's friends. By 9, they were driving around town, peering through rain-streaked windows, at empty baseball fields and closed shops. By midnight, half the town was searching, flashlights bobbing like fireflies through the darkness, voices calling Alex's name echoing through the wet streets. For 3 days, Pine Valley came together, like never before. The school closed, stores put up missing posters. Volunteers brought food to the Wilsons' home where Tom and Diane sat by the phone, jumping at every ring, hope and fear battling in their eyes. Police searched with dogs. The local news ran Alex's picture every hour. Diane wore the same sweater, all 3 days, the last thing she had washed for him, as if changing clothes might somehow break the spell and make his absence real. They found him on the 3rd day, down by Copper Creek, where he used to catch frogs as a kid. The rain had made the normally gentle creek rise and rush. The rocks there were slippery. The police officer who came to the door didn't need to speak. Diane saw his face and collapsed into Tom's arms with a cry that neighbors said broke their hearts to hear. The medical examiner was kind when he explained. A simple accident. Alex had slipped on the wet rocks, hit his head, and the rushing water. Tom nodded mechanically, while Diane stared at the wall, not blinking. Neither really heard the words. The funeral was held on a sunny day that felt like a cruel joke. The entire town showed up. Alex's baseball team in their uniforms. His teachers, even people who had only met him once or twice at the bookstore. The high school principal talked about Alex's kindness. His best friend, Ben, couldn't finish his speech and was led away crying. Tom somehow found the strength to stand up and tell stories about their camping trips, about how Alex once rescued a baby bird that had fallen from its nest and checked on it every day until it could fly away. Diane sat completely still, clutching a photo of Alex as a little boy, his 2 front teeth missing, holding up a fish he'd caught with his dad. Their house filled with casseroles no one ate, with flowers that Diane couldn't bear to look at, with well-meaning visitors who never knew what to say. People brought Alex's baseball glove found in the locker room, his backpack still sitting in his homeroom, his last English essay with an A+ written on top. Each item was like reopening the wound. Time didn't stop, though it felt like it should, as days blurred together. Tom went back to work after 2 weeks because sitting at home with Alex's empty chair at the table was unbearable. Diane took the rest of the school year off. She spent hours in Alex's room, which they left exactly as it was, dirty socks still on the floor, half-finished water glass on the nightstand, homework spread out on the desk. Slowly, painfully, they created new routines. And one of those routines started 6 months after they buried their son. Every Sunday after church, Tom and Diane would drive to Hillside Cemetery where Alex's grave sat under a maple tree. They brought fresh flowers, usually daisies, which he had always picked for his mom as a little boy. Tom would carefully clean the headstone while Diane arranged the flowers in the small built-in vase. Then they would sit on the wooden bench they had installed nearby. Sometimes they sat in silence, holding hands. Sometimes they talked to Alex about their week, about the dog they were thinking of adopting, about how his baseball team had made it to state finals. They talked as if he could hear them, as if he was just out of sight but listening. Other visitors to the cemetery would see them there, Sunday after Sunday, rain or shine, and walk quietly by, respecting their grief. This ritual became sacred. To Tom and Diane, the one thing they could still do for their son, the one thing that kept them connected to him and to each other. In this peaceful spot under the maple tree, for a little while at least, they could pretend that the world still made sense. The first strange sign appeared on a chilly October morning. Diane noticed it immediately as they approached Alex's grave, with fresh flowers. The small baseball figurine they had placed at the base of the headstone last Sunday wasn't where they had left it. Instead of sitting next to the stone angel, it was now perched directly in front of Alex's engraved name. "Did you move this?" Diane asked, bending down to touch the small figure. Tom shook his head. "Maybe the wind knocked it over." Diane frowned. "And then stood it back up perfectly straight?" They let it go that day, just a small thing, easy to dismiss. But the following week, more items were out of place. The smooth river stones Alex had collected on their family camping trips, which they had arranged in a small heart shape, had been rearranged into a straight line. The small LED candle they kept there had been moved from the left side of the headstone to the right. "It must be the groundskeeper," Tom said, though his voice held doubt. "Maybe when they mow the grass?" Diane nodded, but a strange feeling settled. In her stomach, a mixture of unease and something else she couldn't quite name. Why would anyone touch these precious mementos? These small objects were their connection to Alex, carefully placed with love and meaning. 2 weeks later, they arrived to find a bouquet of wildflowers they hadn't left. They were freshly picked, tied with a piece of blue yarn, and placed carefully against the headstone. Diane picked them up, turning them over in her hands. "These weren't here when we left last week," she whispered. "Someone else has been visiting him." The thought was both comforting and unsettling. Who would visit their son's grave? Alex had been popular at school, but teenagers rarely visited cemeteries on their own. His baseball teammates had come for the funeral, but their visits had tapered off as the months passed. That was normal. Life moved on for everyone except Tom and Diane. Then the following Sunday they discovered something that made their hearts stop. Alex's treasured Pine Valley High baseball cap, the one they had buried with him in his casket, was sitting atop his headstone. "That's impossible," Tom said, his voice shaking as he picked up the worn blue cap with its faded PV logo. We put this with him." Diane's hands trembled as she took the cap from Tom. It even had the small coffee stain on the brim where Alex had spilled his drink one morning before school. It was undeniably his cap. But how could it be here? "Maybe it's a similar one? From one of his teammates?" she suggested. But they both knew it wasn't true. This was Alex's cap, the one he had worn every day, the one they had carefully placed in his hands before they closed the casket. They stood there for a long time, the cemetery quiet around them except for the rustling of autumn leaves and distant traffic. The cap felt heavy in Diane's hands, impossibly real yet impossible to explain. In the weeks that followed, other items began to appear. A small book of poetry they had never seen, before open to a page with a poem about stars. A paper lunch bag containing a chocolate chip cookie, Alex's favorite. A handwritten math formula on a piece of notebook paper, and once, most startlingly, a note written in a neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "I miss our talks by the creek. No one listens like you did." Tom and Diane were bewildered. This wasn't random vandalism or the actions of a careless groundskeeper. These were personal items, meaningful gestures. Someone had known Alex well enough to leave things that would have mattered to him. "We need to know who's doing this," Tom said one evening as they sat at their kitchen table, Alex's baseball cap between them like evidence in a mystery they couldn't solve. "Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they knew a part of him we didn't," Diane finished for him. The thought that someone had memories of Alex they weren't privy to was both painful and precious. The next day, Tom visited the cemetery office, a small building near the main entrance with faded curtains and the smell of old coffee. Mrs. Jenkins, who had worked there for 30 years, listened sympathetically as he explained the situation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson, but we haven't noticed anyone visiting that section outside of your regular Sunday visits," she said, flipping through a notebook where the groundskeepers kept their schedules. "And I can promise you, our staff would never move personal items left on graves. We understand how important those mementos are." "Could your security cameras have caught anything?" Tom asked hopefully. Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. "We only have cameras at the main gates, not throughout the grounds. It would be, well, most families want privacy when they visit their loved ones." Tom left feeling no closer to answers. That evening, he and Diane sat in their living room, the TV on but unwatched as they talked through their options. "We could leave a note," Diane suggested. "Ask whoever it is to contact us." "What if they get scared off?" Tom replied. "What if they stop coming?" "We could take turns watching the grave," Diane said. But they both knew that wasn't practical. They couldn't spend every day hiding behind trees at the cemetery. It was past midnight when Tom sat up suddenly in bed, startling Diane awake. Camera," he said. "We could install a small camera near his grave, just temporarily." Diane blinked sleepily, then nodded as the idea took hold. "Do you think the cemetery would allow it?" "We won't know until we ask," Tom said, already mentally, working through how to set it up, how to make it discreet and respectful. Neither of them slept much that night. The mystery visitor had left them feeling unsettled, not scared exactly, but shaken in a way they hadn't been since those first awful days after Alex's death. Someone else was grieving their son, someone who might have known sides of Alex they had never seen. The thought was like a small light in the darkness of their loss. Confusing, unexpected, but somehow hopeful too. The next morning, Tom called in sick to work for the first time in months. He spent the early hours researching small outdoor cameras on his laptop while Diane made phone calls. By noon, they were sitting across from Mr. Patel, the cemetery director, in his wood-paneled office lined with old photographs of the grounds. "I understand your concern," Mr. Patel said, his hands folded on his desk. His kind eyes showed he genuinely cared, which made Tom and Diane feel slightly better about their unusual request. "But we've never had a family ask to install surveillance equipment before. We're not trying to catch someone doing anything wrong," Diane explained, leaning forward in her chair. "We just want to know who else is visiting our son. They're leaving personal items, things that make us think they knew." "Alex, well," Mr. Patel nodded slowly. "The cemetery is a place for mourning, for remembrance. We try to give people privacy in their grief. We wouldn't share the footage with anyone," Tom promised. "And we'd remove the camera after we find out who it is." "What if other families start requesting cameras?" Mr. Patel asked. "We have over 5,000 graves here." Tom understood the concern. He worked in construction and knew how one exception could quickly become a new rule everyone wanted to follow. But this wasn't about setting precedent. This was about their son. "1 month," Diane said quietly, her voice breaking slightly. "Just give us 1 month to find out who's leaving these things for Alex. Please." Mr. Patel looked at the photograph on his desk, his own family smiling back at him. He had children too. Maybe that's what finally swayed him. 1 month, he agreed with a sigh. But the camera must be small, discreet, nothing that would disturb other visitors. And you'll need to sign a form taking full responsibility for the equipment. Tom and Diane thanked him profusely, relief washing over them. On their way out, Mr. Patel added, "I truly hope you find what you're looking for. Sometimes understanding helps us heal." That afternoon, Tom went to the electronics store and spent nearly an hour talking with the sales clerk about their options. He needed something small enough to hide among the flowers, but powerful enough to capture clear images, even at night. He needed battery life that would last several days between charges, and enough memory to record hours of footage. He settled on a weatherproof camera about the size of a golf ball that could be controlled from his phone. It wasn't cheap, but Tom didn't hesitate. What price could you put on answers? At home, Diane had been thinking about where to hide the camera. "What about inside the flower arrangement?" she suggested. "I could get some artificial flowers that would stay there permanently, and we could hide the camera inside them." Tom nodded. "That's perfect. People expect to see flowers at a grave. No one would look twice." The next day, they bought artificial flowers, white lilies and blue forget-me-nots, Alex's favorite colors. Diane spent the evening arranging them in a special vase that attached securely to the headstone. Her hands worked carefully, precisely, tucking stems and adjusting petals. She hadn't focused this intently on anything in months. "It looks beautiful," Tom said when she'd finished. He held up the small black camera. "Now let's see if we can hide this inside without ruining your work." Together, they positioned the camera among the flowers, adjusting until the lens was barely visible between two lily stems. They tested it from different angles, making sure it captured the entire grave and the area around it. "You can hardly see it," Diane said, stepping back to inspect their work. "But it can see everything." Their hands were shaking slightly as they drove to the cemetery the next morning. This felt both necessary and somehow intrusive, as if they were spying on their own son's grave. But the need to know outweighed their discomfort. The cemetery was quiet that Thursday morning. A groundskeeper nodded to them from across the lawn where he was trimming around a family plot. An elderly man stood silently at a grave several rows away. Otherwise, they were alone. Tom carried the flower arrangement while Diane brought fresh real flowers to place beside it. They took their time, making it look like a normal visit. Tom secured the arrangement to the headstone, carefully adjusting it to make sure the camera was properly positioned. "Testing," he whispered as he pulled out his phone and checked the camera's view. The image was clear. Alex's headstone, the small items they'd left, and a good portion of the surrounding area were all visible. Diane knelt to place her fresh flowers, using the moment to whisper to their son. "We're not trying to invade your privacy, Alex. We just want to know who else misses you." They lingered for a while, Tom double-checking that the camera was working correctly and that the motion sensor would activate recording when someone approached. Then they reluctantly left, looking back several times as if they might catch a glimpse of their mysterious visitor. "Now we wait," Tom said as they drove home. Waiting turned out to be harder than either of them expected. Tom checked his phone, constantly, but the cemetery remained quiet that day. The only movement the camera captured was a squirrel running across the grass and the shadows of clouds passing overhead. The next day was the same. Diane went back to organizing Alex's room, a project she'd started and stopped dozens of times since his death. Tom tried to focus on work but kept finding reasons to check his phone. By Saturday, they were beginning to wonder if their visitor had somehow sensed the camera and stayed away. Maybe they'd never know now. "Let's give it until Wednesday," Diane suggested. "That will be a week. If nothing happens by then, maybe we should remove it." Tom agreed, but neither of them were hopeful anymore. Sunday came, and they visited the grave as usual, pretending the camera wasn't there, talking to Alex about ordinary things: the neighbor's new dog, the book Diane was reading, the roof Tom had fixed at Mrs. Henderson's house. Monday passed. Tuesday came and went. On Wednesday morning, Tom was in the shower when his phone chimed with a notification. Diane picked it up, expecting a text from his boss. Instead, she saw an alert from the cemetery camera. Someone was at Alex's grave. "Tom!" Diane called out, her voice high with urgency. "Tom, there's someone at Alex's grave right now." Water was still running in the shower, But something in her voice must have carried because seconds later Tom burst into the bedroom with a towel wrapped around his waist, hair dripping. "Show me," he said, reaching for the phone. Together they stared at the small screen, watching as a figure moved near their son's headstone. The person was too far away to make out clearly, just a small silhouette against the morning light. "It's recording, right?" Tom asked. Diane nodded, unable to take her eyes off the screen. "Should we go there now?" Tom hesitated. "If we show up, they might get scared and never come back. Let's wait and watch the whole recording later." It was the hardest thing they'd done in months, waiting at home while a stranger visited their son's grave. Diane paced the kitchen. Tom got dressed but couldn't focus on anything, checking his phone every few minutes to see if the camera was still recording. After 20 minutes, the movement stopped. The figure had left. "Let's go see what they left," Diane said, already grabbing her car keys. Tom placed his hand gently over hers. "Let's watch the recording first. We might learn more that way." They sat side by side on the couch, the same couch, where they used to watch movies with Alex on Friday nights. Tom connected his phone to their TV so they could see better. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed play. The footage began with an empty view of the grave, the morning sun casting long shadows across the grass. Then a figure appeared at the edge of the frame, someone small, moving hesitantly. As the person came closer, Tom and Diane leaned forward simultaneously. "It's a kid," Tom whispered. "Not just any kid. It was a young girl, maybe 13 or 14 years old. She wore jeans and a dark blue hoodie, her brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, and on her head was a baseball cap that looked exactly like the one they'd found at Alex's grave. She approached slowly, looking around as if making sure no one saw her. When she reached the headstone, she knelt down and set her backpack on the ground. "Can you turn up the volume?" Diane asked. Tom adjusted the settings, and they could hear the faint sound of birds chirping, distant traffic, and then the girl's voice, soft but clear. "Hey, Alex," she said to the headstone. "Sorry I'm coming on a weird day. I usually try to get here before your parents come on Sunday, but we have that trip this weekend, so I had to come early." Diane gasped softly, her hand finding Tom's and squeezing tight. On screen, the girl unzipped her backpack and took out a few items. First, a small bouquet of wildflowers, which she placed carefully against the stone. "I picked these by the creek yesterday," she said. "Remember how you showed me which ones last longest in water? I tried to get those kinds." Next, she pulled out a small paper bag. "I brought another cookie. Mom helped me bake them, but I followed your recipe." She placed the bag next to the flowers. "The one with extra chocolate chips, just how you liked them." Tom and Diane looked at each other, stunned. Alex had created his own chocolate chip cookie recipe when he was 12, adding twice as many chocolate chips as the original recipe called for. He'd been so proud of it. The girl continued talking to the headstone, her voice becoming more animated as she told Alex about her week at school, about a book she was reading, about how she'd finally stood up to some girls who had been bothering her. "I did what you said. I just looked them in the eye and told them to stop. They actually did. You were right." She pulled Alex's baseball cap off her head, running her fingers along the brim. "I've been wearing this like you told me to. For courage, it helps." For 10 more minutes she sat there talking to Alex as if he were sitting right beside her. She laughed, remembering something they'd done together. She wiped away tears when she mentioned how much she missed their talks. Tom and Diane sat frozen, their own tears flowing freely now. Who was this girl? How had she known their son so well? Why had Alex never mentioned her? Before leaving, the girl reached into her backpack one more time and pulled out a small notebook. She tore out a page, wrote something on it, and tucked it under the edge of a stone. "I'll try to come back before Sunday," she said, standing up and shouldering her backpack. "I won't forget the cookies next time either." She touched the top of the headstone gently, an intimate gesture that spoke of real affection, real loss. Then she walked away, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. The recording ended with the empty grave again, now with fresh wild flowers, a paper bag, and a note that hadn't been there before. The silence in the living room felt heavy, overwhelming. Tom finally broke it, his voice rough with emotion. We need to go there. Now. The drive to the cemetery seemed to take forever. Neither spoke much. What could they say? Their minds were racing with questions, with memories carefully examined for any mention of this girl, with the painful realization that there had been a whole part of Alex's life they knew nothing about. When they reached the grave, the wildflowers were there, arranged carefully against the headstone. The paper bag contained a chocolate chip cookie, still slightly warm, and under the stone was a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Diane unfolded it. Alex, the note read, in neat, round handwriting. I got an A on that science project you helped me with before the accident. Mrs. Lowell said my presentation was the best in class. I wish you could have seen it. I used all your tips about making eye contact and speaking slowly. I still get nervous talking in front of people, but I heard your voice in my head saying, "You got this, Katie, so thanks. I miss you every day. Your friend always, Katie." Diane read the note aloud, her voice breaking on the final words. She looked up at Tom, who was standing with his hands pressed against his mouth, trying to hold back sobs. Katie, Tom repeated. Do we know a Katie? Did he ever mention a Katie to you? Diane shook her head slowly. Never. Not once. They stood there in the morning sunlight, holding a note from a stranger who had clearly loved their son, realizing just how much of Alex they had yet to discover. The next day was the longest of Tom's life. After discovering Katie's note, he and Diane had spent hours talking late into the night, wondering how to approach this girl who clearly had meant so much to their son. They didn't want to scare her or make her feel she'd done something wrong by visiting Alex's grave. But they desperately needed to know more. What if we leave her a note? Diane had suggested. But that felt too impersonal for something so important. We could wait at the cemetery, Tom had countered, but that might frighten her, two adults suddenly confronting her in such a private moment. In the end, they decided Tom would wait near the grave the following day. Not hiding exactly, but sitting on a bench some distance away, giving Katie space while making himself available if she returned. So there he sat on a cold bench under an oak tree, clutching a thermos of coffee as the hours crawled by. He'd arrived at 10 a.m., figuring that was early enough. By 2 p.m., his back ached and his coffee was long gone, but he couldn't make himself leave. What if today was the day she came back? At 3:15, just as the afternoon shadows were lengthening, he spotted her. She was walking slowly along the cemetery path, carrying her backpack, her ponytail swinging with each step. She wore the same blue hoodie and, his heart caught, Alex's baseball cap. Tom stood up, suddenly unsure what to do. Should he call? Out? Approach her? Wait until she'd finished her visit? The decision was made for him when Katie looked up and saw him. She froze instantly, her eyes widening with recognition. Tom realized she must know who he was. Alex's father. Had Alex shown her family photos? Katie, he said gently, walking toward her but stopping a respectful distance away. I'm Tom Wilson, Alex's dad. The girl took a small step backward, clutching her backpack strap tightly. I'm sorry, she blurted out. I didn't mean to bother anyone. Her voice trailed off. You're not bothering anyone, Tom assured her quickly. Actually, I was hoping to meet you. My wife and I, we've noticed the things you've been leaving for Alex. Katie's cheeks flushed. I should have asked permission. I didn't think. No, it's not that at all, Tom said. We're glad you visit him. We didn't know you. We're friends with Alex. He never mentioned you to us. Something flickered across Katie's face. Surprise and maybe a touch of hurt. Oh, she said softly. An awkward silence stretched between them. Tom realized he should have planned what to say. Finally, he gestured to a nearby bench. Would you mind if we talked for a few minutes? I'd really like to hear how you knew my son. Katie hesitated, then nodded. They sat down, leaving plenty of space between them. Tom could see she was nervous, a young girl talking to a stranger, even if he was Alex's father. My wife and I read your note, Tom said gently. The one about your science project. Alex helped you with that. Katie nodded, relaxing slightly at the mention of something concrete. He helped me practice my presentation like 5 times. He was really good at public speaking. Tom smiled. He was in the debate club for a while. I didn't know he was coaching. Others, though. He said I just needed confidence, Katie explained, looking down at her hands. That's why he let me borrow his cap. He said it was his lucky cap, and when I wore it, I should remember I was braver than I thought. Tom's throat tightened. That sounded exactly like something Alex would say. How did you meet him? He asked. Katie's story came out slowly at first, then more easily as she realized Tom truly wanted to hear it. She had moved to Pine Valley last year halfway through 7th grade. Being the new kid was hard, especially when you were shy and bookish and didn't know anyone. One day, about 6 months before Alex died, some girls from school had followed Katie to Copper Creek, teasing her about her clothes, her accent. She'd moved from the next state over, her habit of always carrying a book. They'd taken her backpack and thrown it in the creek. Katie had been trying to fish it out, crying and soaked when Alex came by. He was just out running, Katie said, a small smile forming at the memory. He stopped and helped me get my backpack. Then he sat with me until I stopped crying. He didn't make me feel stupid for it. After that, they'd run into each other at the creek regularly. It became their spot. Alex would help Katie with her homework sometimes, or they'd just skip stones and talk. He'd recommend books to her. He was a big reader too, something Tom and Diane knew well, and she'd bring cookies her mom had baked. Did Alex? Tom hesitated, not wanting to sound accusatory. Did he ask you not to tell anyone about your friendship? Katie shook her head. Not exactly. Those girls were still bothering me at school. Alex said sometimes bullies try harder if they know something bothers you. So we kept our friendship kind of quiet. It wasn't a secret exactly, more like something that was just ours. Tom nodded, understanding dawning. Alex had been protecting her, and in the busy rush of their lives, his work, Diane's teaching, Alex's many activities, they'd never noticed these creek visits with a young girl who needed a friend. My mom knew, Katie added. She met Alex a couple times when she picked me up. She thought he was really nice, like a big brother. She paused, tears forming in her eyes. When we heard what happened at the creek, Tom reached out instinctively, then pulled back, unsure if it was appropriate. But Katie continued, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. It was awful. I couldn't even go to his funeral because nobody would understand why I was so upset about a high school kid I supposedly didn't know. So I started coming here instead, to talk to him. Tom's own eyes filled with tears. Katie, would you be willing to meet my wife, Diane? Alex's mom? She'd really love to hear these stories too. Katie looked uncertain. You're not mad that I've been coming here? Mad? Tom shook his head emphatically. No. The opposite. You've given us a gift, a piece of Alex we didn't know. That's precious to us. 3 days later, Katie and her parents came to the Wilsons' home for dinner. Her mother, Linda, brought the chocolate chip cookies Katie and Alex had perfected together. Her father, David, was quiet but kind, thanking Tom and Diane for reaching out to them. At first, the conversation was awkward. How do you begin to discuss a bond between children that exists now only in memory? But then Diane brought out Alex's yearbooks, his baseball trophies, and the novel he'd been reading when he died. Katie's eyes lit up seeing these pieces of her friend's life. He was reading that same book at the creek, she exclaimed. He told me the main character reminded him of me. Soon, stories were flowing freely. Katie shared memories of Alex at the creek, patient and kind, teaching her to skip stones and stand up for herself. Tom and Diane told stories of Alex as a little boy, determined to climb the highest trees, always ready with a joke. For the first time since Alex's death, laughter filled the Wilson home. Not the forced kind that comes when well-meaning friends try to cheer you up, but genuine laughter born from loving memories shared. Before they left, Katie hesitantly handed Diane a small journal. These are some of the things Alex told me, advice and stuff. I wrote it down because it helped me. Maybe you'd like to have it. In the months that followed, Katie became a regular visitor to the Wilson home. She'd stop by after school sometimes, help Diane in the garden, or look through Alex's books for new recommendations. Tom taught her to throw a baseball properly, something Alex had apparently been working on with her. The camera was removed from the cemetery, but their Sunday visits continued, now often with Katie joining them, bringing fresh flowers and stories of her week that she wanted to share with Alex. In their grief, Tom and Diane had installed a camera to catch an intruder, only to discover something far more valuable: the legacy of kindness their son had left behind in a young girl's life. Through Katie, they found a new way to know Alex, not just as their son, but as the person he had chosen to be in the world when no one was watching. And in that discovery, they found a path forward through their grief, not away from Alex, but alongside the memory of him, enriched by stories they had never known and the continuing impact of a life that, though too short, had mattered deeply.